The Gloriana Set by ThebeMoon, read by LMX Mabella. Chapter 15. Squeaky Mouse Voices. Malfoy didn't approach Hermione after Dada class or after dinner, but she knew it couldn't last. He was just waiting for his opportunity and found it that very night. A pack of first years had broken into the potions cupboard that afternoon and lifted Slughorn's entire store of moss blossom, also known as squeaky flowers. If you heavily sniff a squeaky flower, your voice gets high and squeaky like a mouse's. It was like kids sucking on helium balloons in the muggle world. These particular students ran off with about 20 squeaky flowers and spent a hilarious hour squealing at the top of their lungs out by Hagrid's hut. The high voices maddened Fang, who broke out of the hut and leaped on a thestral. The thestral was hitched to a carriage, preparing to bring back a student who'd left on a family emergency. When Fang fell on the thestral, the winged animal took to the air, throwing off Fang and breaking the carriage's shaft. The carriage smashed against the hut and the thestral disappeared for 2 days. The students involved, all Hufflepuffs who could never resist funny voices, were then set to write 100 sentences as detention. Slughorn was supposed to oversee them, but he was busy helping Theo brew his makeup potion and asked his favorite student to step in. Which was why Hermione was sitting on a teacher's desk Tuesday night, knitting a long brown scarf, while 8 children hunched over their parchments, scribbling the words she'd placed on the board. I will not sniff squeaky flowers to speak in mouse voices and upset dogs who fall on thestrals and damage valuable property and inconvenience busy 8th-year students. The students had groaned over the length of her sentence, but Hermione found it perfectly appropriate. She was knitting away, unable to leave for another half hour, and so, of course, Malfoy strolled into the classroom. Slughorn probably told him about the detention. Hermione was truly beginning to dislike the Slytherin head. Granger? Malfoy said amiably, as if they'd never had words. He sent an amused glance both at Hermione's knitting and the sentence on the board. Keep writing, Imogen, Hermione said sharply to the red-headed girl who looked up open-mouthed at Malfoy's entrance. Malfoy moved to lean against the teacher's desk, standing entirely too close to Hermione's way of thinking. The look in his eyes made her uncomfortable, aware of her thin white jumper and form-fitting jeans, her hair piled messily on her head. Malfoy wore his usual black, his rolled-up shirt sleeves clearly revealing the dark mark on his forearm. You really do knit, he said, eyeing the long needles. I thought it was just another tale. I have nothing to say to you, Hermione said. Rather dull colour, he went on, tugging at the end of the brown scarf. I hope it's not for me. Hermione glared as her knitting needles clicked. Granger, he said low, I need to talk to you. I'm busy. You're knitting and watching dingbats. 2 pastimes infinitely more interesting than talking to you. Don't worry, Granger, he said with a smile. I won't try to seduce you here. Malfoy! Hermione cast a Muffliato spell to avoid being overheard. The red-headed girl looked disappointed. Give me one reason why I shouldn't hex you across the room. You'd be modelling poor behaviour. Adults should work out their differences amicably. Like you did with Theo today, she asked acidly, or Ron last night. All right, you and I should work out our differences amicably, without getting physical. Another smile. Unless you want to. Hermione shook her head. You didn't hear a word I said this morning? I certainly did. Malfoy's face was suddenly all hard angles, his mouth a thin line. I heard a version of myself I didn't much care for. A man who would read a woman's journal, used information inside to manipulate her for sex, then force her to keep it a secret because he's ashamed of her. Really, Granger? You read? He sighed loudly. Yes, I read a bit of your precious book. Who would have thought you were such a schemer? It was shocking, really. You sitting at the table working on the codex, looking so prim and proper. Well, is there an apology coming? Hermione asked, because I've yet to hear one. But perhaps a mudblood doesn't deserve. Don't you dare put that word into my mouth. The fact that you're muggle-born. A mudblood. Stop saying that word, Malfoy snarled. Why not? She yelled, leaping up to face him. You taught it to me. The scraping of chairs caught their attention, and Hermione and Malfoy turned to see the first years lined up wide-eyed against the far wall, as far away as they could get. Hermione glared at Malfoy. Now look what you did. You scared them. You scared them, he muttered. She lifted the muffliato spell. "It's all right," she said reassuringly. "Finish your sentences. Mr. Malfoy and I are just having a disagreement." The first years looked at each other and slowly returned to their desks. Hermione perched herself on the teacher's desk again and picked up her knitting. Maybe he'd get the hint. No such luck. Malfoy continued to loom over her. "Look at me, Granger, please." The last word drew Hermione's eyes from her scarf. He had moved closer, one hand on the desk, the dark mark clear against his pale skin. "I'm sorry," he said, too low for the Hufflepuffs in the front row to hear, although they tried. "I'm sorry I read your book. I'm sorry I pushed you. I'm sorry I hurt you." Hermione turned her head away, and the Hufflepuffs under her sudden gaze began scribbling madly. "Granger," Malfoy said. She reluctantly looked back up at him. His face wore that open expression she'd last seen at the Gryffindor portrait hall. "Granger," he repeated, "I'm far from reformed, but I'm not the monster you painted me outside ancient ruins either." Hermione said nothing, and now it was Malfoy's turn to look away. He sighed and joined her, sitting on the desk, looking out at the rows of Hufflepuffs. The red-headed girl, Imogen, looked up from her parchment and gave him a tiny smile. His own lips quirked slightly. "Were we ever that small?" he mused. "You were right, little shit," Hermione said, winding yarn around her finger. "I was," he agreed. "And you, bursting into our train compartment." "Has anybody seen a toad?" Malfoy asked in a high, fluting voice. He rolled his eyes. "As if any of us would be caught dead with a toad." "I should have turned you all into toads and given one to Neville," Hermione said. He looked amused and lowered his voice again. "Look, Granger, I know you don't trust me anymore, if you ever really did," he said, "but the Muggleborns here are in danger. You are in danger. You need to work on that potion, and I'm the only one who can help you." Hermione continued to knit, thinking, and Malfoy was silent as well. Finally, she put her needles down and cast another muffliato spell. Then she turned slightly to face Malfoy. "You have a point," she said, "but we're at an impasse. You're right, I don't trust you. Unless you can prove you didn't write the Die Mudbloods message, you can't help me." Malfoy frowned. "That makes no sense. Just because I acted like an idiot doesn't make me a criminal. If that were the case, the weasel would be in Azkaban. Stop calling him that." "Ah, so quick to defend him," Malfoy sneered. "Yes, I am. Ron and I are friends. We've been friends for 7 years. We've lasted through good times and bad, and we always will. Maybe you've never heard of that kind of friendship, but it's real." Hermione turned back to her knitting and tried not to feel guilty. Maybe she shouldn't have thrown his friendless state in this face, but honestly, he was always on her last nerve. Malfoy stood off the desk and turned back to her. "Perhaps I did ruin everything, Granger. It's probably better that way." His fist clenched. "But you have to let me help you." "Then help me trust you," she challenged. "You created a problem, then fix it." She pointed a knitting needle at him. "Remember fiducia? All trust has to be earned. Earn it, Draco Malfoy. For once in your fucking life, earn something." He met her eyes, glare for glare, brown against grey, then nodded. "Fine," he snapped, and stalked out of the room. The door slammed hard enough to make the desk shake. Hermione turned back to the students, who had once again abandoned their sentences and were staring open-mouthed. She waved her wand to lift the muffliato spell. "Well," she snapped, "get back to work." "Are you going to forgive him, whatever he did?" asked Imogen. "You should forgive him," said a snub-nosed blonde in the back. "He's very handsome," said a third. "Girls are so stupid," said a boy with dark hair and an ink smudge on his nose. "He's the total wanker." "Of course he is," Imogen said, "but he likes her." "But she hates him." "That's because she has taste." "She doesn't hate him." "Enough!" Hermione yelled. "Go back to your horse. It's almost curfew. Professor Slughorn will oversee your extended detention tomorrow, since you were too distracted to finish your sentences today." The students obediently gathered their things and exited the room chattering. "I don't know why he likes her. Anyway, she's so crabby." "He just wants her body." "You pig, Percival." Hermione let her head drop into her hands. Sweet Merlin, she was no smarter than that pack of squeaky idiots. She had just issued a challenge to a Malfoy, and only Godric knew what would happen next. Chapter endnotes. Hello, little Hufflepuffs, and welcome to our show. I bet you all were wondering if you'd ever see anything from the summary besides the blood messages and Dramione. Up next, A Gryffindor fracas at lunch. You rather let us all jam over at the Slytherin table, Theo told her. We were hoping you'd tell Weasley to fuck himself. I lost 10 galleons. To be continued. Thank you for listening to The Gloriana Set by ThebeMoon, read by ThebeMoon. If you would like to stay up to date on upcoming chapters and stories, you can follow me on AO3, YouTube, or Spotify.